Hey guys, I found this article to be very interesting. Some people just won't stay home during a pandemic. Here's 6 reasons that may explain why. Living through a pandemic is strange. Um, Most of us have never been asked to make sacrifices like this before, staying home and limiting contact with others. All the disruption can make people anxious, and for some reason, they include the novel coronavirus altogether and carry on as though business as usual, despite repeated pleas from the government and health to stay home and slow the spread. Many people just won't. Spring breakers are crowding beaches, shoppers packed in the grocery store aisles, older adults refusing to skip church. Why won't some people take the threat seriously? Psychologists say there are a handful of reasons, and most of them come down to human nature. These socializers are under responders, okay? Then there's over responders, are the panic buyers who have stockpiled months worth of supplies. They're scared of betrusting themselves with stacks of toilet paper, and that empowers them and eases their fear. The people in the middle are doing what they're being asked to do without panicking or acting too lax. They're pandemic Goldilockses. Under responders are those disobeying public health guidance, the ones who consider themselves vulnerable. They aren't following social distancing because they don't believe they'll get sick, even though it could prevent more vulnerable people from being infected. The under responders are to blame if the virus continues to spread for months across the country. They see it as a way to regain control, like the panic buyers hoarding toilet paper. The anti-social distancing set continues to gather in groups and ignore advice because they feel powerless. Exercising their defiance makes the virus seem smaller. One of the challenges with uncertainty is it reminds us of things that are out of our control. I think this sort of defiance, to a certain extent, is trying to regain control. And in the same way that hoarding supplies is detrimental to curbing a virus, so is defying advice. Gathering in crowds only increases one's risk of exposure. Limiting contact with others is the only way to slow the spread of the novel coronavirus. They don't think it's a problem. They feel like it's a distant problem shouldered by residents of populous cities to foreign countries. It's sad, but it's just not their burden. People in the West are ignoring advice to stay home because it's too confusing. People who live in communities where infection isn't widespread or officials haven't imposed lockdowns may be less willing to distance themselves from others. Maybe it's wishful thinking on their part, but people are downplaying the significance. Maybe because they're not seeing people in their communities coming down with the virus, or they're numb to it. It's creating an infodemic. When people's media diets, social media feeds, and conversations with loved ones consist of nothing but COVID-19, they become desensitized to its severity, he said. I'm kind of seeing this trend right here. I was just thinking that yesterday, that people are resilient and they're adapting to this new pandemic, and they're becoming infodemic. People are getting numbered out. The load contributes to mixed messages. Young people have been told repeatedly that they're lower risk. That, compounded with young adults' proclivity for risk taking can mean they don't fear the virus. They're thinking individually. We've had long prioritized individual freedoms, which I think is good, sometimes even over community benefit. And during a pandemic, that mindset can be fatal. I think it's good to be free, but you still have to make decisions, not just for yourself, but for the other people. That's why healthcare workers, celebrities, and regular folks are imploring the public not to stay home for themselves, but for others. Higher risk adults over 60, people with compromised immune systems, and doctors and nurses are on the front lines of the pandemic. Community effort is the only way of managing this virus. They've got more than themselves to consider. And then they're lonely. They're being denied social interaction for extended periods, and that stings. It can be particularly difficult for older adults who are already at a higher risk of mortality from depression and loneliness. They may be less willing to use tech tools such as FaceTime or Zoom video conferencing to communicate. We're social creatures. We also have a lot of freedoms. It's hard to make the changes we're being asked to make. So can they be persuaded to stay inside? They're trying to find this out by identifying the psychological factors that contribute to these responses, either too extreme or too lax. Public officials can retool their messaging to convince people to follow social distancing. Messaging can be tricky. Some believe people need to be scared into staying home. Others argue that using fear can backfire because people who respond fearfully don't make decisions based on logic. Hence the panic bulk buying. Yes, please do not make people afraid. It's difficult to strike an equal tone with the over and under responders, but there's one thing that they agree on. Convincing people to stay home is our best bet against a pandemic. People, whether you're afraid or not, lonely or not, the quicker you stay home and let this virus level out, the sooner life can return to normal. Please do as you're being asked. Stay prayed up.